So we just wanted to explain Representative Barbara Lee's absence this evening. She is on her way to South Africa for Nelson Mandela's funeral. I would now like to introduce to you a family that I have great pleasure in working with almost every day. They are the most dedicated, original, smart, and generous supporters of so much of what we do, of our investigative fund, of our writing fellows, and the prize that we honor Barry Lynn with this evening. It is my pleasure to welcome to the stage Neil Rosenstein, Gladys Miller Rosenstein, and to salute the president of the Puffin Foundation, Perry Rosenstein.
Got my water.
Where are you going, my little one?
Thanks. Thank you very much. On behalf of Perry, Gladys, and the entire Puffin family, thank you. Thank you. You know, many folks have asked us to clarify exactly what is the mission of the Puffin Foundation. Well, much of our work is related to the arts. We support hundreds of aspiring artists each year who are seeking to address the meaningful social issues of our time and whose work engages the public, from students to seniors. And, as Taya mentioned, we're proud to support the writers at The Nation and so many other investigative journalists at progressive outlets across the country. Each year, however, we feel compelled to address many other vital issues. Now, the foundation was named for a bird whose nesting sites were encroached upon by civilization. Through the cooperative effort of naturalists and the public, they were able to protect these sites and bring about a healthy regrowth of the puffin population. Today, however, global warming threatens the health of the planet and the puffins as well. No less a threat, this time to our democracy, is the erosion of the separation of church and state. This vital constitutional guarantee helps protect our civil society from the passions and biases of the religious zealots who would impose their beliefs on others through the actions of our government. Whether it's prayer in the schools, the teaching of creationism, or the violation of a woman's right to privacy, this religious intrusion into our government and our lives is a grave threat. This evening, we are particularly proud to recognize and honor an ally dedicated to the preservation of the Constitution's religious liberty provisions in Reverend Barry Lynn, the Executive Director of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. Reverend Lynn is a longtime civil liberties activist and ordained minister, accomplished lecturer, and member of the Washington, D.C. and U.S. Supreme Court Bar. Now, many of you are probably aware of American United's role as the leading defender of the Constitution's guarantee that America will remain a democracy and not become a theocracy run according to anybody's religious agenda. AU works in the courts on legislative issues and at the grassroots. And one great initiative took place last year when they produced Voices United, a week of musical performances by 100 artists in all 50 states to celebrate and to defend the vital principle of church-state separation. That type of artistic, educational activism is exactly the kind of thing that Puffin embodies. As parents, as citizens, as residents, we should fear a country that doesn't have champions of justice like Barry Lynn. We can think of no better person to introduce the Reverend than Cecile Richards, the president of Planned Parenthood and a former recipient of the Puffin Nation Prize.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Neil, and all of the, thank you, the nation. Oh no! Thanks. It's great to be here tonight with the nation, and with all my good friends, and Katrina Vanda Heuvel, who is just such a fabulous co-conspirator and everything, and Alan Bergman. That was extraordinary. My husband never sings to me like that, so I just have to say thank you for bringing that to all of us. And let's see, I also want to just real quickly introduce Alexis McGill-Johnson, who's the president of the Planned Parenthood Board of Directors. So anyway, she's a big nation supporter, so anyway. And it was great to hear Mayor-elect Bill de Blasio. I love to be a citizen of New York City. It feels great. So, and also the always invigorating Louis Black. It was really, As you have seen, it is pretty tough to be on the other end of a Lewis Black skewering. And as a Texan, I don't know how many of you all caught this summer, but he really kind of took a whack at all of us with this video that was around that was basically making fun of our backwards ways and our food and our hair and Rick Perry. And so we decided to do whatever we could to get back at him. So we came up with a strategy that is being implemented even as we speak, and it's called Elect Wendy Davis Governor of the State of Texas. So there you go, Lewis. Yeah. But I'm really here tonight to honor an incredible friend who I've known many, many years, Barry Lynn. Now, Barry and I have a lot in common. I won't go through all of it. Well, one of it is we both have were raised by moms that you absolutely did not want to mess with. Some of you knew mine. But his, I think, actually could give Ann Richards a run for her money. Now, just a few years ago, Barry's mom, who was then in her 80s, turned to him and said she had something that she had to confess, something that she'd never told anyone before. So Barry was somewhat shocked, and he said, well, what is it, Mom? And she took a deep breath and said, well, Barry, once a girlfriend and I were escorted out of a little town in northeast Pennsylvania and threatened by the police to never come back. Well, Barry was horrified. He said, well, what had they been doing? She said, well, we were passing out birth control literature, which, of course, in those days was against the law. And, of course, there are some people in this country who would like to make it that way again. But as Barry says, we can't go back, and he has dedicated his life to making sure that we don't. You know, I met Barry years ago when I was in Texas, and we were organizing against a Christian coalition because they were involved in everything. They were taking over school boards, and they were censoring textbooks and ending access to sex ed. And frankly, Barry Lynn was our go-to guy in this country. He was doing this work before anyone else. And you may know, you see him on TV all the time. He has gone toe-to-toe with everyone, with Pat Buchanan, with Pat Robertson, with Jerry Falwell, with all the fine folks at Liberty University. In fact, at Planned Parenthood, we would say that Barry is a true master debater. And that is normal, and that's healthy, and we support it, okay? At Planned Parenthood, yep. I'm so glad you got that. It's kind of late. In any case, but as you'll also find out, he also is a hilarious guy and really has this unique ability to get at some of the ridiculousness of our opponent's claims. In fact, I don't know if he'll tell the story tonight, but sometime you have to ask him to explain his own personal theory of how Noah actually got all those animals into the ark, including the unicorns and the dinosaurs. Apparently, they were all babies and very, very, very tiny. Barry is a Renaissance man, though. It's not only his work that he's passionate about. In the progressive community, he is literally the world's expert on country music, and I think that's helped him a lot in his work, because I think there's a lot of connection between country music and some of the folks he has to deal with on the religious right. I mean, just look at a couple of the great country songs of our time. I Liked You Better Before I Knew You So Well. Handing that out to Pat Robertson, right? Or another classic, I Still Miss You, Baby, but my aim's getting better. And of course, my favorite, How Can I Miss You If You Won't Go Away? So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you someone who's been taking on the religious right before it was cool, Reverend Barry Lynn, head of Americans United for Separation of Church and State.
Picture, yes. Take it. All right. It's for the album cover.
Exactly.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Cecile, for all of that. And we do go back quite a ways, although we didn't personally know how Noah got all those animals into the ark. We're not quite that old. I want to thank Cecile. I want to thank her for the tremendous work that she does. I want to thank all of the people. This is truly an extraordinary honor, and I want to thank all of the folks at the Puffin Foundation, including Perry, Rosenstein, the whole board, and of course all of my great friends, John and Katrina, and all those at the Nation Institute. And there's nobody, you know, in the nonprofit world who can actually accept an award like this without also thanking the colleagues that we've worked with, the mentors, the friends, the family, including my wife, who just flew up from Florida and just got here. And all the supporters that we have, financially and otherwise, all over the United States. And of course, it's great to be here with Louis Black. This is the first time I was able to see him for under $100. You know, I posted this story on my Facebook page today. This is the real headline: TSA confiscates sock monkey's pistol. And just moments ago, someone responded and said, I feel a Louis Black rant coming on. So we'll talk about that. Okay, I do want to admit two other things, though, right at the beginning. Number one, I did not see the remake of The Sound of Music that aired last week. No, it's okay, I just didn't see it. I did, however, stumble across really a discourse between two towering intellectuals of the 21st century. That would be Bill O'Reilly chatting with Sarah Palin on the subject of secular progressives. And they were particularly complaining, of course, about our focus on the war against Christianity and the bloody antietam battle of that war, the aforementioned War on Christmas. Yeah, you can giggle about it. Louis Black makes jokes about it, but you know, there's about multi-millions of Americans who actually don't think that there's anything funny about it. They think it's truly going on, and that red and green not only will be prohibited in schools, but will probably be prohibited at traffic lights in the very near future. Now, I'm safe in saying that everybody here is likely to be a secular progressive, because secular has two meanings. Secular, of course, could be non-theistic. It can also simply mean having the government be neutral in matters of religion. That's right. And so there are theists like myself, and there are plenty of non-theists who agree on this fundamental view, that government should not be picking winners and losers in the matter of religion, that it should be giving no imprimatur to religion in general or specific religions themselves. We are the same people that insist that religion fund itself without taxpayer support. And the corollary of all of that is that people can believe and practice whatever they choose, no matter how old or new or odd or simplistic or dogmatic anybody else thinks it is, until and unless those beliefs impinge on the legitimate rights of other people. You know, that was the framers' intent. It's worked very well. It hasn't hurt religion. In fact, we have a dizzying level of spiritual resources in America. There are at least 2,000 identifiable religions in this country. We have probably 30 million freethinkers and atheists and humanists, all rounding out our intellectual landscape. There's one over there. But today we have two problems, mainly related to the separation of church and state, and I want to borrow from physics, although I didn't do very well in it, but I do know there's something called momentum and there's something called inertia. The momentum is due to the continued presence of a very powerful force commonly known as the religious right, which today still constitutes about 19% of the American public. This is a movement of theocrats who seek to craft public policy along their own narrow sectarian lines. I have a book on my desk called Politics According to the Bible, which in its 624 pages gives a purported answer to every conceivable political issue. It doesn't just tell you that U.S. policy should prohibit abortion, should disallow marriage equality, but it drills right down to the basics, explaining what the Bible, properly understood, tells us should be the next fighter aircraft to be purchased by the United States Air Force. If you're taking notes, it's the Raptor F-22. These are the same people, of course, who are now yammering about their alleged loss of religious liberty in an egregious example of a subversion of the meaning of words. You know, Confucius once said, when words lose their meaning, the whole universe unravels. Things are getting close. Because now religious liberty even means that religious liberty attaches to for-profit corporations whose bosses oppose contraception, and they say, refuse to cover it in their employees' health insurance plans. The far right says corporations have free speech rights, so therefore they must have religious freedom rights as well. One of the companies in a case to be heard in March before the United States Supreme Court is a national arts and crafts chain called Hobby Lobby. Another is a Mennonite-owned furniture company. Now, if I ever happen to see a make-it-yourself garden gnome sitting next to me in a pew, or I sit down on a wooden lawn chair and it starts to pray with me, then I will suggest maybe it has a cognizable religious liberty claim. But until then, this is just another way for people to claim that the religious convictions of the head of a company control the moral decision-making of the dozens or thousands of women who work for those firms. And that is a terrible direction. Now, I hate to bum people out, and there are two things happening that give me some solace about the religious right's future, or more accurately, perhaps, their loss of a future. First, when it comes up with truly bizarre ideas, for example, earlier this year there was a proposal in the legislature of North Carolina to allow each county to align itself with any religion they choose. And you know there would be a lot of Scientology and a lot of Muslim counties there. But all you have to do is have Rachel Maddow or, you know, our MC or possibly even Jon Stewart mention it, and it gets laughed off the legislative landscape because it's so bizarre and so crazy. And second, and maybe more importantly, there's a variety of new polls out that suggest that far-right evangelicals are now losing their grip on their own children. A growing number of children in evangelical households now accept the evidence for evolution. Yeah, and the percentage of young evangelicals supporting marriage equality is now at 64%. You see, that is not a trajectory for the continuation of religious extremism. That's common sense prevailing. Now, that's the good news. Now, there is some inertia, though, because I said I'd talk about that as well. We might call it a political inertia, the tendency to have political leaders normalize things that the framers of our Constitution would have found quite abnormal and truly dangerous. And here are just two examples. President George W. Bush began a program referred to as the Faith-Based Initiative, an effort to get more grants and contracts to religious providers of secular services like mentoring or feeding the hungry. Based on the largely mythological claim, he was quite good at that in regard to weapons of mass destruction, but he also had this one. He said, there's widespread discrimination in giving government funds to religious groups. We must level the playing field. Well, at the time, the Wall Street Journal reported that Catholic charities alone appeared to be getting about $500 million in federal assistance. And the Salvation Army, which is literally a Christian denomination with very strong homophobic tendencies, at that time were getting $89 million in the state of New York alone. If that's discrimination, I'd like to be in line. Bush recognized that you couldn't force people to participate in religious services to get help, although plenty of them still try that. But he did allow groups to get tax support even if they refused to hire people in those subsidized programs who have different religious beliefs than they do. So you could literally hang up a sign in, say, a Baptist homeless shelter seeking new staff and say no Jews and no atheists need apply, as if humanists tucked in the bed sheets in that shelter differently than did a humanist, an atheist, or a Jew. This compromised an executive order that went all the way back to the Truman administration, barring religious discrimination in hiring with tax dollars. When candidate Barack Obama addressed this matter back in 2008, he said this kind of discriminatory hiring in taxpayer-funded programs should stop. Unfortunately, as we approach 2014, the practice still continues. Anti-poverty group World Vision, whose president is a very frequent visitor to the environs of the White House, will not hire any non-Trinitarian Christians. If any Unitarians here, forget it. They won't hire non-Trinitarians, even in predominantly Muslim or Hindu countries, where the group operates thanks in no small measure to $640 million that you and I are paying them. World Vision sees no problem with this hiring practice of Christians only. Noted one official, we're very clear from the beginning about hiring Christians. It's not a surprise, so it is not discrimination. Right. We told you, Ms. Parks, you'd have to get to the back of the bus. We told you in advance before we sold you the ticket, so don't go calling us bigots. You know, we've rejected that idea a long time ago. Why does the practice continue? It's political inertia. We're told that federal agencies are evaluating each hiring practice on a case-by-case basis. The Justice Department says you can discriminate in hiring as a religious group if you sign a document that says employing individuals of a particular religion is important to our religious exercise. In other words, you'll take the tax money from everybody and you can still use it only to hire the people that are just like yourselves, just the people that you're comfortable with. Does that sound like an old story? The government calls this self-certification. Maybe every time a big-time drug dealer is arrested here in New York, they could be released if they just certified that, A, they didn't necessarily do anything wrong, and even if they did, it was because of their religious affiliation. Second, inertia affects our tax laws, believe it or not. Churches and other most charities are given a 501c3 tax exemption. They're only forbidden to do one thing: absolutely no endorsement or opposition to any candidate for public office. Some ignore this rule. Over the past few years, we've reported 50 really egregious cases of pulpit politicking for or against candidates, not allowing, in one case, people to get on the church bus to take them to the polling place unless they agreed in advance they would only vote for Republicans. Or how about telling parishioners in a Catholic church that voting for Barack Obama was like voting for both Hitler and Stalin at the same time? These complaints have languished for years. Why? Because back in 2008, a federal judge ruled that the IRS needed to rewrite a few words in a regulation to have a slightly more senior Treasury Department official sign off on investigations of this time. The administration, sadly, has not done that. I think if you put two monkeys and a typewriter in a room for about 45 minutes, they would have been able to rewrite this regulation. But 5 years later, it has not happened, and these violations of law continue. But I said I don't like to make people feel depressed. I think that this administration has reason to believe, because of new leadership in that Office of Faith-Based Initiatives and new initiatives on the part of the IRS, if we have enough people communicate with the president about just these two issues, I believe he can change these policies before it becomes too late in his administration for him to do anything. And if there's one thing I would suggest you do when you get home is write a note. Don't write a letter because they're still irradiating them, but write a note to the White House suggesting both of these things need to be changed. So with the momentum of a still functioning religious right, significant inertia by the current political leaderships, we still do, in fact, have trouble in River City. I know that trouble in River City is not from The Sound of Music. I know it's from The Music Man. I just didn't want you to think I know nothing about Broadway. Well, so much for that and my thoughts. I just wanted to leave you with this. We saw and heard so much just last month on the 50th anniversary of the murder of President John F. Kennedy. I want to conclude with one brief observation that he made to a group of Protestant ministers in Houston when he was campaigning in 1960. He said, "I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell the president, should he be a Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote, where no church or church school is granted any public funds or political preference, and where no one is denied public office merely because his religion differs from the president who might appoint him or the people who might elect him." And to that, I say a great big secular amen. And I leave you with one question. Would any political figure you know today be willing to be this blunt about it? I think we need to find those political leaders who will be that honest, with that integrity, a real conservative principle that says that the best thing that government can ever do for religion is to simply leave it alone. Thank you so much for this honor. Thank you for this. And I leave you go. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Barry, it's an honor for me to present this trophy to you from the Puffin Foundation and from Perry Rosenstein, the founder and president of the foundation. We honor your work and know with you leading the way, we'll live in a true democracy a little longer.
Thank you. Thank you. You want me to read this?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And this says, it's the 2013 Puffin Nation Creative Citizenship Awardee, Reverend Barry Lynn, Executive Director of Americans United, courageous fighter to maintain separation of church and state, guaranteeing religious freedom for all, at the Puffin Nation dinner today, 2013. Thank you so much.
But I have something else. And the trophy is fine, but we also have a $100,000 award for you to be able to continue your wonderful work.
Thank you.